13-year-old Mia strolled through Riverbend Park, her favorite spot in the entire city. To her, it wasn't just any park. It was her father's place. As the precinct's captain, her dad patrolled here every weekend, and Mia cherished the thought of bumping into him while he was on duty. With each visit, she found new joy in the winding trails, the echo of children's laughter, and the comforting shelter of tall, leafy trees that seemed to watch over her. Today, the late afternoon sun painted the park in a soft, golden glow, casting warmth on everything it touched. Mia wore her favorite jeans and sneakers, her footsteps light with the hope of surprising her dad along his route. The park felt alive as families gathered for picnics, couples strolled hand in hand, and friends chatted on benches. Mia breathed in the familiar scents of fresh grass and lake water, her heart swelling with pride at her father's role in protecting this place and everyone who enjoyed it. As she walked deeper along a secluded trail, a strange quiet replaced the lively sounds. Fewer people wandered this part of the park, and the air felt thick, pressing down on her shoulders like a warning. Up ahead, she noticed a figure in a police uniform standing alone near a bench. At first, she wondered if he might be one of her father's friends. But as she approached, the officer's stare settled on her, and Mia's steps slowed, uncertainty creeping into her heart. "Hey, you," the officer barked, his voice rough and sharp, making her flinch. She glanced up, offering a polite nod, expecting a simple greeting in return, but his eyes held an unkind edge that made her stomach clench. Hello," she murmured, trying to pass him without further exchange. But he stepped into her path, blocking her way with a stance that felt more intimidating than protective. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, his tone cold and unyielding. "I'm here to see my dad, Captain Thomas Reed," she replied, hoping her father's name would earn her safe passage. Instead, a mocking smirk twisted the officer's face, his eyes narrowing as he looked her over, as though her words had only deepened his disdain. Mia's heart raced as the officer's expression hardened, his mocking gaze digging into her like cold steel. She tried to remain calm, recalling her father's advice to always show respect to officers, even if she felt uneasy. Yet, this man's behavior was far from anything her father would have condoned. "Oh, so you're the captain's kid?" he sneered, his tone laced with a disdain that left her breathless. "I wouldn't have guessed." He crossed his arms, tilting his head as if examining something unworthy of his time. Mia's cheeks flushed, a mixture of shame and anger rising within her. "Yes," she answered quietly, though her voice wavered. "I just wanted to say hello. I thought he might be close by." The officer laughed, a sound harsh and devoid of warmth. "You think you're special because of him? You think that lets you walk around here like you own the place?" His words hit her like a slap, and Mia's confidence drained, leaving only fear in its wake. She took a small step back, hoping he would let her go, but he remained steadfast, blocking her path. "Listen," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just wanted to find my dad. I didn't mean to bother anyone." "Oh, you didn't bother me," he replied, his smirk widening. "But you need to learn something, girl. Just because your daddy's the captain doesn't mean you can do as you please." Mia felt her throat tighten, a knot of dread forming in her stomach. She had seen the way her father's officers looked up to him, respecting his unwavering sense of justice and compassion. This man, however, held none of that respect, none of that integrity in his eyes. Instead, there was only hostility, an eagerness to put her in her place. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "Kids like you think you're untouchable, that you're above the rules." His fingers dug into her shoulder as he reached out, his grip firm and unyielding, making her wince. "Maybe it's time someone showed you otherwise." Mia's instincts screamed at her to pull away, but his grip held her fast, his sneer deepening as he watched her squirm. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to let him see her break. Please, let me go, she managed to say, her voice trembling with barely contained fear. But the officer only laughed, tightening his hold. Not until I'm finished, he hissed, his tone filled with a malice that made Mia's blood run cold. Mia's pulse pounded as the officer's fingers dug deeper into her shoulder, his mocking smile never leaving his face. She felt a rising sense of panic, a helplessness so intense it threatened to paralyze her. She had always thought of the park as a place of safety, a place filled with laughter and warmth. But now, under this man's grip, it had transformed into a place of fear, a twisted version of the sanctuary she once knew. She took a shaky breath, willing herself to stay calm, though her voice trembled as she spoke. I don't know why you're treating me this way, she whispered, hating how small and weak she sounded. I just wanted to see my dad. Please, let me go. The officer's smile twisted, dark amusement in his eyes as he leaned closer, his breath smelling faintly of something bitter. You think you can just walk around here without consequence, Think you're above everyone else? No, I don't, Mia stammered, her heart hammering in her chest. She tried to step back, but his hand tightened, anchoring her in place. Without warning, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a can, popping it open with a loud hiss. He held it out to her, the cold metal inches from her face. Here, he said, his voice dripping with mock kindness. Go on. Take a drink. Mia recoiled, the bitter smell of alcohol filling her senses. No, I don't want to, she replied, her voice shaking as she tried to turn her head away. The officer's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold anger. Did I say you had a choice? He snapped, shoving the can closer. Take it. Now. Mia's hands shook as she tried to push the can away, her fear mounting as she felt her strength failing against his relentless force. Please, stop, she pleaded, desperation thick in her voice. She tried to twist out of his grip, but he held her firm, his fingers pressing into her skin with a bruising intensity. Drink, he commanded, his voice low and menacing. With a sudden jerk, he pressed the can to her lips, tipping it so the bitter liquid spilled onto her mouth and chin, the sharp taste making her gag. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she tried to turn away, her body trembling under the force of his control. As his laughter filled her ears, cruel and hollow, Mia's mind screamed for her father, hoping with all her heart that he would sense her distress. But as she stood there, trapped in his grip, her hope began to slip away, leaving her feeling utterly alone. Just as Mia felt her last ounce of strength fade, a voice thundered through the silence, cutting through her fear like a blade. Mia! Her heart leaped at the sound of her father's voice. Captain Thomas Reed was rushing toward them, his face a mixture of horror and fury as he took in the sight of his daughter held captive by one of his own officers. The officer's smug expression faltered, his hand loosening its grip on Mia's shoulder as he turned to face her father. Captain, he muttered, attempting a weak smile, but the hardened gaze that met him showed no hint of mercy. What do you think you're doing? Captain Reed demanded, his voice low and deadly. He stepped forward, pulling Mia into his arms with one fierce movement, shielding her from the officer's oppressive presence. Mia clung to him, feeling the relief wash over her in waves as she finally felt safe. The officer crossed his arms in an attempt to feign indifference, though Mia could see fear flickering in his eyes. Just teaching her a little lesson, Captain. Thought she could use a reminder of her place, he sneered, though his voice wavered under Captain Reed's intense glare. A reminder of her place? Captain Reed's voice was a cold, quiet fury. She's my daughter, and no one has the right to treat her like this. He reached for his radio, his fingers steady as he spoke with unmistakable authority. This is Captain Reed. I need immediate backup at Riverbend Park. Officer misconduct, code red. The officer paled, his bravado dissolving as he began to stammer. Captain, I didn't mean, I was just... Save it, Captain Reed snapped, his words cutting through the man's weak protests. He turned back to Mia, his expression softening as he gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice filled with a tenderness that soothed her frayed nerves. Mia nodded, though her face crumpled as fresh tears escaped. He wouldn't let me go. He tried to make me." Her voice broke, unable to describe the humiliation she had felt. Captain Reed's jaw clenched, the anger in his eyes unmistakable as he cast one last, piercing look at the officer. "You crossed a line today," he said, his voice steady and unyielding. "You're going to answer for this." Within minutes, other officers arrived, their faces solemn as they took in the scene. One by one, they looked from Captain Reed to Mia, understanding the gravity of the situation. The officer tried to resist as they moved in to detain him, but his protests were ignored as they led him away. Holding Mia close, Captain Reed whispered reassuring words, his presence a shield that finally lifted the weight of fear from her heart. As the nightmare ended, Mia clung to her father, grateful for the unwavering strength that had brought her back to safety. In the days following that harrowing afternoon, Mia struggled to make sense of what had happened. Every corner of the park, once her sanctuary, now held memories of fear and betrayal. But with her father and mother by her side, she found strength she hadn't known she possessed. The outpouring of support from family, friends, and even strangers gave her courage, reminding her that she was not alone. Captain Reed, too, became a constant source of comfort. He held her close through the tears and listened as she recounted every painful detail, assuring her that what happened would not be ignored. He was determined to see that the officer responsible was held accountable and that justice would be served. News of the incident spread quickly, igniting conversations across the city about accountability, respect, and change. Soon, Mia found herself at the center of a growing movement, one that extended beyond her personal story. Her experience had become a call to action, a rallying point for others who had been wronged and silenced. At home, Mia and her parents received letters and messages from people who had been inspired by her bravery. Many wrote of their own experiences, stories of resilience in the face of cruelty and mistreatment. Though still shaken, Mia felt a strange sense of purpose, a resolve to use her voice to make a difference. One morning, her father approached her with a proposal. "The city council has asked if you'd be willing to speak at the upcoming community forum," he said gently. "They want to hear from you, Mia. They want to understand what happened and why things need to change." Mia hesitated, fear flickering in her chest, but the thought of making the park safe again, for herself and for others, overpowered her doubts. With her father's encouragement, she decided to share her story publicly. Standing in front of the crowd, her hands trembled, but as she looked out into the sea of faces, friends, family, strangers, all watching her with unwavering support, her voice steadied. She spoke of that day in the park, of the fear she had felt and the injustice that had nearly silenced her. She spoke of the importance of kindness, accountability, and the right to feel safe, no matter who you are. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, a sound filled with compassion and solidarity. As her father wrapped an arm around her shoulders, Mia felt the weight of fear lift, replaced by a sense of empowerment. In the weeks that followed, Mia continued to speak up, standing alongside her father as he worked to bring about reforms within the police department. Together, they helped to implement new policies, training programs, and accountability measures. Mia had become more than a victim. She had become a symbol of resilience and change, her courage inspiring a city to do better. As she walked through the park once more, the familiar sounds of laughter and joy returned, filling her heart with peace. She knew she would never forget what had happened, but she also knew that her voice had made a difference. She had turned her fear into strength, her pain into purpose. And with her father by her side, Mia was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together they could make the world a safer, kinder place. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our latest videos. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Thank you all for taking the time to watch, and see you in the next video.